That was a perfect countdown. All right, welcome to Multifamily Underwriting. And this is from Connect and Invest, our monthly education series that we go through various topics that have to do with multifamily real estate. Excited about this particular one. I actually put a bunch of extra effort into it because everyone always thinks of underwriting specifically when they're doing a purchase. And actually, underwriting is very important throughout the life cycle of an entire asset. And most people skip all of the other underwriting situations except for the purchase. So we're going to go through underwriting, and then I'll do examples of each of the other uses of underwriting and what the differences are between them and how that affects your overall investment. Now, I made multiple social media videos promising I would give the quick and easy purchase underwriting. This is the super simple. If you got nothing else to go on, just look at how much the rent is and then look at the price per door. That is like super basic, and it gives you at least a good starting point before you even just first thing, how much can I rent this thing for? How much does it cost per unit? Gets you right in the door, take you under 3 minutes to calculate that. And that gets you in the ballpark real fast as far as, hey, is this crazy overpriced? Like if we were buying this thing in Manhattan, or is this something closer to a reasonable return that I can actually make some money on? There are multiple components of underwriting: the income analysis, expenses, financing. The reason that one is in there is it affects the return that you as the owner or the buyer are going to have. And then that rolls down to the valuation of the asset, which is going to swing as the market cycle changes, because the acceptable returns also change based on what else is happening throughout the entire market. That's why we roll down from income, expenses, what is the current financing, how does that affect return, and then finally, what is the sentiment in the market and what are acceptable returns? All right, this is number 2. If you walk out with nothing else from this entire presentation, please walk out with this. Multifamily assets, if you get the income correct, the rest of it you're probably going to be okay on. If you get this wrong, you're going to be swimming real hard upstream to get the rest of the asset to work out. So please, if you're doing nothing else when you're looking at an asset, is get the income right, check the comps, make certain they're legit, make certain you can achieve the rents. Like if you're going to put your focus on any one particular thing, making certain you hit the income as close as you can, and being conservative when you're doing underwrite, that's going to be significantly worth your time. Gross income, vacancy, loss to lease, bad debt. That's one that a lot of people skip, because guess what? Sometimes there's residents who forget to pay their rent, and then you have to go chase them or write it off, move on. Other income sources. When people are looking at assets and there is no other income, that's typically a flag that there's an opportunity to increase the income in the asset, because all multifamily should have some level of other income besides just the rent. And one of those is utility bill backs, there's parking, there's laundry, there's pet rent, there's fees. There's a number of auxiliary things that can be added to make up additional income to the owner. On the expense side, in fact, we're going through it right now. August is property tax appeals time. So if you have not checked out your property taxes, you definitely should. This is an opportunity. It comes around one time a year and you get to appeal your property taxes. This happens to be exactly it. New taxes are coming out. Insurance. It's a great time of year to be looking at your insurance. We're actually seeing insurance coming down about 10% year over year. If you're not getting a discount on your insurance, happy to help you shop with some really good agents. Management fees, repairs, maintenance, utilities, contract services, operating. Here's one of the big things you will see. If you see expense ratio way up in the 60s, that's a flag as someone to say, oh, there's something that's an opportunity here. A whole lot of it is either they're overcharging through maintenance, they have some serious problem with their utilities. I sold one building, and the opportunity that the buyer saw was that their water and sewer bill was about double the other properties in the area. And so after he put the property into contract, did his due diligence, sure enough, there was multiple leaks throughout this entire building, closed on it, and then hired a leak company to come in, plumbers. They went and fixed all the leaks throughout the entire property. His utility bill dropped in half. Now that's direct income right to him as an owner. There are other opportunities when you see something scattered. On occasion, you will see some of them where the owners are completely hands off, and some maybe even out of the country. And you'll see the management fees with leasing, turnover. There's all these additional fees being added on. So you'll see an 8% management fee, but by the time you actually add it all up, it's like 12.5. And that's one of the things to look for when you're underwriting someone's asset, is where are all these expenses going when you see something. The other side is there you'll see a ton of OMs where the expense ratio somehow magically is like 20% of income because it has the taxes, insurance, and nothing else. That's a warning that you're unless you are the best operator in the world, in which case, tip of the hat to you, is probably not going to happen. So that would be another warning on the other side. One serious opportunity is either utility billbacks or submetering. If your property happens to be set up in a way where submetering can be accomplished, it does a number of things that are positive. Because each resident is actually getting a bill every month for their usage of water, they naturally cut it back because they're having to pay for it, and they actually get a bill that they have to pay. These submeters have automatic readers that you can set. So if there's continuous flow, it can flag, have your maintenance guy come check it. If there's a massive spike and the water stays on at the high level for an amount of time because there's some kind of break, there's some problem, you can have it flag, have your maintenance guy come out to the exact unit, knowing exactly where the water is. If the water's running on a regular basis, if it's too high on a massive amount of time, it'll flag. You can set up flags for it. And they're getting a bill from a third-party utility company. So they actually see that if they quit using so much water, their utility bill goes down, which overall, it passes back from you, gets billed back to the resident, but also the resident actually sees that their actions actually result in savings. So there's a lot of wins for doing utility actual submetering if your building happens to be set up in a way that you can put the meters easily in line. Because some buildings, because of how they were built, it's very difficult to do. If you happen to have one where it is something you can do, there's multitude of benefits to actually putting the submeters on. Financing. This is the next line item after it, is financing, and this swings with the market. If there's readily available financing at attractive interest rates, it's going to have one swing. If the credit market tightens up, interest rates go up, amount of the loan to value gets dropped, it will swing the valuation a different way, and also is going to change your behavior and the behavior of buyers based on that. And something very cognizant to be important is what's happening in the current market. I put debt service coverage ratio as its own line because to me this is one of the most important things. You will see tons of lender term sheets, and right at the top it'll say loan to value 75%, loan to value 80%, loan to value whatever it is. Somewhere down it will have also a debt coverage ratio, and it is the lesser of those two things. So knowing your debt coverage ratio as far as the last 5 years has been more important than the loan to value, and being able to actually calculate that out. It comes in incredibly important when you get specifically into agency lending, both small balance and the normal agency Fannie and Freddie, because they are very driven by debt coverage ratio. One of the things to be cognizant of is you have to know, and if you're talking to a lender who understands them and has worked with them, they have certain specific underwriting requirements where they will take your income and expenses, your rent roll, and then they put in their own expenses on top of that. And it's important not to just look at yours and say, oh, this is what mine is. Here's my net operating income. Okay, here's going to be the debt coverage ratio. Here's the proceeds I can get. You have to work with a lender who specifically understands those agencies, because each one have their own criteria and what they're going to add back in. And then that is actually, their NOI is the one that's actually going to be used to define the maximum loan you can get, not necessarily the one you are achieving. And that's something a number of owners have been caught with because they didn't understand that difference. And if you're dealing with an inexperienced lender, they won't explain that to you up front, or they may not know that. So if you're dealing with a lender who deals with Fannie and Freddie, any of the agencies, it's important to work with one who understands how their specific underwriting works. That way they can tell you right up front, hey, what is going to help them move in the right direction to get you the loan that you need and the amount of proceeds that you want. Out of the last 2 years, we have not done a single purchase with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or any of the agencies. It's all been banks and credit unions. And one of the big reasons specifically is insurance flexibility, which may sound odd that why would you care about insurance? It's a 50% difference in the cost of insurance between if you have to have windstorm, if you have to have terrorism coverage, if you have to have business income loss insurance, law and ordinance coverage. They all add up significantly. And that's a big difference between agencies and credit unions. Their insurance requirements, and it's also something that's very can be easily missed, because most of the time you just look at what's the loan to value and how much is the interest rate. But the insurance requirement, specifically in Florida, insurance makes a huge difference, and having that flexibility makes a big difference in how much money you actually put in your pocket. Bridge lending, that's its own little universe, and it's just depends on how much you're willing to pay and what they're willing to give you. So I put that one on there just as a backup. The other comparison, once you do the analysis of actual financing, is going through and looking at all the sold comparables. And it's easy to look through there and just say, oh, here's the 3 sold comparables. It's important to actually check through and say, okay, does this property are actual comparable? Is it got a beautiful resort style pool? It's 300 units and it was built 1 year ago, and we're comparing it to a 1970s with no amenities, 8 unit. Like, are they in the right range? My personal favorite is this particular thing right there. I get asked all the time, well, what's the cap rate? What is the cap rate? All the time. That metric, especially for non-institutional assets, is incredibly, say, malleable. One person's definition can be totally different from another, because how the underwriting, there's no real standard that everyone is required to use for the actual underwriting the asset. So are we using the 20% expense ratio and then coming to a cap rate? Are we assuming a 70% expense ratio? That's actuals. Are we using billbacks that include reserves? Are we skipping property management? Are we reassessing the taxes? Are we not reassessing the taxes? There's so many things in there that, to me, especially for the assets that I'm involved in, using cap rate is really just, it's more of just nice to have. Gross rent multiplier, to me, is way easier to standardize, because it's very easy from outside observer to say, oh, I can see what the rent is, and I can see exactly what the cost of the asset is per unit. And I can compare those very easily from the outside. And I know that then the operating expenses should average out. If we have somebody who's a really good operator or somebody who's a terrible operator, those things will just kind of work themselves out. But if you know the top line, it's much easier to standardize across assets when you're looking and comparing your comparable sales. The easiest is price per unit, price per square foot, because those are just direct math. I mean, that's as simple as you can get. The income approach is the #1 driver in the space of multifamily. That's going to be the one out of the three. You have the income approach, you have the replacement cost or new construction approach, and you have comparable sales approach. The income approach is the one that's going to get the most weight when it comes to an appraisal and when it comes to a valuation of an asset. The appeal of an asset and the return that a buyer is willing to accept can actually be influenced by the seller, which may say, well, how would the seller actually influence what a buyer is willing to pay? Well, on the physical side of the asset, if you have an asset that's got a ton of deferred maintenance, is run down, doesn't look good, has bad collections, has a ton of vacancy, has old roofs, old parking lots, a buyer is going to require a much higher return or pay a much lower price than an asset that is in great shape, has a great new parking lot, it's been painted, the property's full, it's cash flowing, you got good collections. That is actually something that a seller can affect. That one is one you see all the time and is actually physical and super easy to actually visualize and see the two next to each other. You see a rundown building, you see a really clean building. That one's obvious. The financial side is not as easy to see, but also has an impact. Having well-documented financials does the same kind of influence, not only on a buyer, but on the lender, because there's a lot less guesswork, a lot less fear that they have that they're missing something when things are well documented and easy to follow for not just the buyer, but also for the lender and for the appraiser. Rent rolls that are growing over time. Everyone likes graphs that go up and to the right. If you see a rent roll that's going down, that is going to cause a ton of red flags with the lender, because they're going to assume that if it's going down, it's going to continue to go down once the new buyer takes over. If you have a rent roll that's steady or steadily increasing over time, way easier to understand, way more confidence is given both the lender and the buyer. Same thing with operating expenses, trailing 12 and trailing 3. When you see those moving up in the right direction and increasing in income, it has a big difference. And that's something that an owner, when they're timing a sale, is important to be cognizant of, to set up financials to make sure that we get a good snapshot and it looks in the right direction, and it's heading the right way. I'm going to go through a number of spreadsheets now and talk about a purchase underwriting, return on equity underwriting, looking at a sale underwriting, but you're looking to sell an asset, and how each of those vary and have different impacts. All right. First off, this is the one everyone knows right here, is the purchase, because everyone uses purchase underwriting. You can see on the top, you have the income, the number of units, the rents, going down through the expenses. The two main things that are affecting here is, one, when you're doing a purchase of an asset, Eddie, we were just talking about this, you can get surprised with tax reassessments. So for ours, what we use is 80% times the millage rate to get us a tax reassessment. When we're taking a property to market and marketing it, we get a brand new insurance quote, because that may or may not fit the requirements of what the seller has, may or may not match up with what a buyer is going to need. In our particular case, we usually get 2 insurance quotes. One is with windstorm and one is without. That way a buyer can look and see the difference between them. The other operating expenses will roughly stay the same for an existing owner and the purchaser. I ran through here and just kind of came up with some numbers, like here's basic loan, put that in place, the purchase price. I used a 1-to-5 debt coverage ratio, and we took the lesser of 70% or 1-to-5 debt coverage ratio. In this case, it was the 1-to-5 was the constraining factor on the loan. And then said, okay, is a buyer willing to accept at this price a 5% return? And the question, I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe there's some upside in this deal that they're able to drive the rents up, so they have some opportunity to do that. But that is generally the basic purchase underwriting. If you'd like a copy of the spreadsheet, we're happy to share it with you. for purchases. Is there any questions on purchases for underwriting? Okay. Now, a lot of people stop there and think underwrite is only for the purchase. This is the return on equity for people who already own assets. And this is an often overlooked analysis because once you own an asset, a lot of people don't look at them again, but it's important to keep an eye and say, how is this asset actually performing versus the rest of my portfolio or versus the other opportunities that I have today? Now, notice when we're doing the analysis for return on equity, we are not reassessing the taxes because they're not going to change as you're the owner. And you have you have exactly what the taxes are. You have exactly what the insurance is. Every single other thing stays exactly the same. There's nothing to be reassessed or done there. And then it's just a matter of coming up with what the value is today. And you're going to have whatever the current loan is on the asset. It could have been taken out 5 years ago, whatever that current loan is, whatever the current debt service is, and coming up with, okay, based on this loan payoff, what would be my equity at this price? If this is what the property is worth, this is the loan payoff. I have a large amount of equity here. My cash flow after debt service this is exactly what it is today. And that gives my return on equity. And this gives you an idea. It's like, as an owner, okay, how is my asset performing? It also could go through and go, okay, if I want to improve the performance of this asset, what are the things I need to do? How much do I need to drive up the rents or add additional income in order to get this return to what is acceptable for me as an owner? I put this as Q1 because in Q1 you're doing your taxes anyway, so you have you have 100% of the previous year. You have all the rent rolls, you have the entire P&L for the entire year. So it's easy to do that in Q1. Take a look at the asset and see how it was actually performing. I picked Q3 because that is when in Florida our property tax bills come out, and it's time to look at, hey, should we go and appeal our taxes based on a current valuation? So that's why I picked Q3 to do another analysis of the property. And it's going to be roughly the same thing: actual taxes, actual insurance, and we have come to a valuation of the property. Here's the actual loan payoff, cash flow after debt service, and then equity and return on equity. This is one of the things, especially, I'll use the biggest one where this comes up with is especially for investors who purchased their properties 10, 15 years ago, and they're not looking at the return on equity, they're looking on the return on cost. So if your basis in the property from 15 years ago was, I don't know, 30% of what the value of the asset is today, and you're looking at the cash flow today versus the amount of cost you had 15 years ago, it doesn't really help you make a good decision because you're comparing something that was 15 years ago with something today. But your equity is what you have in the asset today. Cash flow is also today. So when you compare those two, it gives you something to really make a decision on that's actually helpful. And I picked the third quarter as the second time because it should be done at least twice a year. This is when you're looking at property tax appeals. The new assessments come out from all the counties here in Florida, and it's a great time to, that's a good reminder. This is what the county says my building is worth. This is what they're going to tax me on. Does that line up with what it's actually worth? Refinance. This is one of the great things about multifamily is you have the opportunity to do actual infinite returns where you actually pull all your money out, refinance, keep the asset, it still cash flows, and you have none of your original investment in it. When you are doing the calculation for a refinance, you're going to go through and do the exact same thing. We use the exact same spreadsheet, actual taxes, actual insurance to come up with the NOI that is being derived from the property. This is where, depending on the lender you're using, they may add in reserves, they may not. They may impute a management fee, they may not. It's important to know you're working with a lender that understands the underwriting requirement of that specific, the actual lender and the underwriter you're going to be going in front of. That way you can line up and know that your NOI that you expect is the same one the lender is going to be using. because they're typically going to be giving you a term sheet where it's a 1-to-5 debt coverage ratio or 1-3, and whatever it is, 80% loan to value, 75% loan to value, depends on what the constraining factor is. Typically, it's going to be the debt service coverage ratio. When you go through here, so we're going to have the new loan coming in, your existing equity, and debt, your cash flow after debt service, how much the loan costs to go through the refinance, what your original loan payoff is. So you're going to walk out of closing in this particular case with 1.8 million, and then your return on equity after doing the cash out refi would drop down to, in this particular case, 4%. So it's important when you're going through the calculation to understand what am I looking to achieve, and does this actually give me what I'm looking for? And this is one of our spreadsheets. If you follow us on Facebook, like us on there, and direct message us, we'll send you the copy of it, and you can have a copy of this exact spreadsheet. Finally, I'm going to go through the difference. I had a ton of people asking me, why are there not more properties hitting the market? Like, why are there so few properties on the market right now? I'm going to go through the exact analysis that sellers are going through, whether implicitly or explicitly. They're going through this exact analysis right now, and it's going to explain why so many sellers are hesitant to go to the market and some of the reasons that they're waiting for. So this is the exact same asset, but at an interest rate of 6.25%. So when they go to sell the asset, this is reassessed taxes, new quote on insurance, buyer expectation, 8.25% return. Seller, after closing costs, debt payoff, walks out of with, and this is a fictitious $2 million. Purchase, so they could sell the building for 6.6, walk out of closing 2.1. If they wait and interest rates move, the increase in the price goes up based on new interest, 8%, right? We're just going to use some round numbers. It goes up by 8% on the top line. But the equity that they walk out of closing goes up by 24%. So whether a lot of owners, whether they're doing this implicitly or actually doing the calculation, it's a give or take. It can be a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio. And sometimes it can be a 4-to-1 ratio, depending on how leveraged they currently are. And it's something really important to keep in mind as you are making the analysis of whether this building is worth selling or not, is what is it worth today? And then how much do I think it could be worth in the future? Because the debt is roughly the same. This year, next year, it doesn't move a lot. What changes is the equity. And that equity is 3-to-1. For every dollar the actual price goes up, the equity goes up 3. And it makes a huge difference to owners. And this mathematical calculation, to me, explains a lot of what's happening where you have tons of the sellers just sitting and not transacting. Because if they have a vision of the future that's even 10% better, well, that's a 30% increase in their equity. Even if they think the future is only a 5% better, that's a 15% increase. So there's a lot of reasons for sellers to sit on the sidelines and wait if they can see a future where the value goes up. And it's something important to keep in mind, even if you're buying property, is just to know what are the other side, like what is the other side thinking, and what are their variables that they're playing with when they're doing analysis. All right. These are our next Connect and Invest. We're doing leverage. We're going through everything you need to know about multifamily financing. And September, we're going through the state of the market. So that's all the transactions, what has leased, what has been delivered, what has been sold in the third quarter. And we're going through an entire due diligence process for purchasing multifamily assets in November. And that's our, we got this one, our track record. And all right, Nikki, do we have any questions from our friends on Zoom. Well, they know what to do. They have to go. Hang on a second. Let's see if we can figure this out. All right, let's see if we can figure out what to do. Okay, if you want a copy of the spreadsheet, I'm going to look at the top corner right here. Anybody can tell me what it says. There it is, readily available for all. Just go to Facebook, like 100units.com, and type in Taylor, because we're celebrating Taylor Swift's new album coming out. So, and we will happily send an entire copy of the spreadsheet. It's right there, ready to go. That's the only question? Really? Oh, wow. Man, I did such a good job. Good job, Joe. All right. Very impressed. I can't believe I hit all that. I'm for sure with all these Excel spreadsheets, somebody's going to catch some math problem or something. I messed up. I corrected about maybe 15 minutes ago. I realized I did one of the errors in math, and I was like, wait, that doesn't add up at all. So they're hopefully we'll let them know if anyone checks my math, and it's because that was something I messed up on. But no questions at all? Really? I crushed underwriting? Oh, that was awesome. Oh, you can't see a thing? Awesome, guys. I really appreciate it.